And I think, the big question is, why do organizations want this FHIR solution, and why are they investing in it now, right? I mean, there's a lot of data that's been around for decades, and why is there movement now in the space?
So, I mean, we're all in healthcare, right? So we know kind of the R word. What drives innovation a lot of the times in healthcare is regulation, right? So ultimately, there are a number of CMS requirements that have, required, right, or at least certain folks are anticipating will require the need to support FHIR standards in some way or fashion, right? It really depends on the type of organization that you're running. There are some prior authorization related CMS requirements that are coming kind of down the pipeline. And then obviously certain states have different requirements as well. There were previously some CMS related requirements as it relates to kind of patient access, provider access, and a number of different FHIR based API suites that folks and, payers in particular, were required to support. So I think that's typically the driver, right? But I think underneath that, and I think one of the reasons that policymakers have wanted to drive this standard, right, is because they know that ultimately, again, to that kind of point I made before, there's leverage in the activity, right, to create one more frictionless ecosystem, one that can really deliver better on outcomes, knowing the reality of the disparate systems that exist to be able to, really achieve a lot of the regulations that they're requiring from an operational standpoint. So I'd say number one is regulation, but then number two is, standardization, right? Every, whether you're a payer, whether you're a provider, whether you're kind of, an IT platform like ours, everybody's looking to be able to expand their product roadmap and set, in as much of a streamlined way as possible, right? So FHIR gives you really an ability to kind of, from a data model standpoint, have confidence that you're going to be able to communicate with a number of different systems to facilitate a number of, different use cases. It all of a sudden streamlines the conversation when you're dealing with a new partner around reconciling your respective data models. A lot of the times that's one of the biggest challenges. We have customers who have 5 different terms, right, for a patient, right? A patient, a participant, a member, a beneficiary, right? So when you have, and then it's the same dynamic for providers, and then all the related data related to each of those entities. So when you have that dynamic, right, I think folks are really have an appetite to simplify that conversation and then simplify the way systems are architected to be able to support the data models that are needed. And then finally, I think it's, extensibility. So again, there's confidence that one, what you're doing will be backward compatible or interoperable with other systems, but then two, there's confidence in the ability to extend that data set based off of just the nature of how the FHIR standard works with extensions and with implementation guides and kind of the evolution of the standard that happens pretty rapidly over time. So yeah, anything else you'd probably add to that, Khan?
Oh, I can add a lot to that one. So Marcus touched on probably one of the more important pieces, particularly for payers at the moment, the CMS requirements that are slowly being communicated and socialized. So in 2021, 2022, we had the patient access and provider directory API requirements that were based around FHIR. One of the less regulatory, barriers that health organizations have had, especially in health tech when you're trying to innovate, is just getting the right data. I think that has been a huge pain point for us. It's when you need to transfer that much material, right, from one place to another. If you can make that aspect efficient, then you just need to worry about what you want to do with the materials once you have them. Right now, there's a huge struggle to actually get that data to a point where we can actually use it in a way that's beneficial for patients and for payers and for providers as well. And FHIR really, really helps that, right? It's something that a lot of our clients now who aren't involved in FHIR almost all of them have it on their roadmap that they want to be FHIR compatible in the future, because they can see exactly where it's going in the industry. And with the regulatory compliances, it also means that they can expand their business model without having to invest, immense amount of times, coming back to the term that Marcus used in the last episode, speed to value. Right? That now becomes a lot less of a barrier when you're using FHIR, because you can go to an organization and say, hey, are you FHIR compatible? And they're like, yes. That's 80% of your integration work done at that point. If you're both FHIR compatible, it could be an organization that you've never spoken to before. It could be an organization that deals with data that you have not yet dealt with. And immediately you can say, are you compatible with FHIR? They're like, yep. Cool, sweet. We're most of the way there. And then you touch on a little bit more about what Marcus said about extensibility. And, I'll get into this a little bit later. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep into the functional aspects of FHIR just yet. But you do have the ability to extend the model in the same way that implementation guides do, right? You can add in your own proprietary data points without breaking the FHIR standard. Someone else can receive your data, and your data could have a whole bunch of proprietary elements in it. They can still process it, and they will still have that data available to them if they need it. But because of the way the FHIR standard works when it comes to reading that, it's all good. It's backwards and forwards compatible in that kind of scenario. And yet, I think the CMS regulations are incredibly important. I think that they have identified a number of issues, and CMS have been trying to do their own reporting and their own understanding of where we are with healthcare and payers in the US. And I think they kind of felt the pain, and they were like, we need something that's going to help all of us, especially when you're dealing with federal programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And, as a result, and as a testament to FHIR's interoperability standard, CMS have chosen to go with FHIR, and which I think is a very, very smart decision.
And I think just to add one more point, right? If we get a bit more abstract and we really get to, it's a lot of the times, I think in this space especially, it's very easy to get into the weeds of the technical needs and the technical requirements. But ultimately, I think what regulators want, what organizations want, right, are better outcomes for patients, right? More efficient operational processes, right, that allow them to get a lot more out of a lot less. In order to do that, right, you have to have a model that allows you to facilitate rapid development, rapid adaptation to regulatory changes, even if those changes require you to integrate with another system on the fly, right? And then frictionless communication. One of the biggest things we're seeing is, being able on the side to be able to communicate very, frictionlessly between a provider and a payer to make decisions, right? The provider is always going to live in their EMR. They're always going to live in their native environment or some provider portal, right? Typically, the payer is going to live in another environment for triaging those communications and doing async notifications and inquiries and so on. So, in order to facilitate that overarching aim, you have to have frictionless, simplified data pipelines.